Conference Championship weekend is finally upon us. Legacies are on the line for several teams, and today we're going to be breaking down every single conference championship game, not just the Power Five, not just the ones that impact the playoffs, but the entire slate of games. So with the intro out of the way, I'd like to say hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today we're breaking down the conference championship schedule, starting with the ACC and Florida State versus Louisville. So this game would have been a little bit more interesting if Jordan Travis was healthy and if Louisville had managed to beat Kentucky, because then you could have made the argument that this was a play-in game for the playoffs. However, those two things didn't happen. Jordan Travis is hurt, and Louisville did not beat Kentucky last week. So effectively, this game is, if Florida State wins, they're in. If they lose, they're out. And a Florida State win would certainly make things a little bit more interesting in terms of who gets into the playoffs and who doesn't, because there's going to be a lot of people bitching about Florida State making the playoffs, because they almost certainly would. And assuming Washington were to lose tonight, Friday, they would also probably be the 3 seed, in my opinion. I don't think Oregon, even after beating Washington, would jump Florida State. I think Texas, maybe, if they absolutely obliterate Oklahoma State. And FSU versus Louisville is a close game. I could see Texas jumping Florida State, but I don't particularly see any scenario unless Oregon just comes out and beats Washington 56-7, in which case they might jump to number 2, okay? But I don't particularly think that's very likely. So I think the real story for this game is going to be giving whoever ends up at number 2 a fairly easy path to the national championship game. That being said, in terms of the matchups in this game, Florida State versus Louisville, I think these are two fairly similar teams. I think Florida State really, since the Jordan Travis injury, has effectively become, we're going to run the football and that's going to be how we win, and then we're going to play very, very good defense. And that is what Louisville has done the entire season, with kind of the only exception being against Kentucky, which is a rivalry game, so maybe you can kind of write that off a little bit. I don't particularly think you should write it all the way off, but strange things do happen in rivalry games all the time. Ultimately, with these two teams being very similar, there are two things that I think are going to be differentiating factors. Number one is the level of talent, and Florida State and Louisville are a lot closer in terms of level of talent overall on the team than I think most people realize. The only spot where Florida State has a clear-cut, beyond a shadow of a doubt advantage is at the wide receiver position. There is no other position where Florida State has a clear advantage, indisputable advantage over Louisville. However, it just so happens that the wide receiver position is one of the positions where your talent actually matters the most. So if Florida State were to win this game, I think it would come from the wide receivers making plays that maybe other wide receivers can't. And Florida State has the wide receiver talent to be able to do that. And not just wide receivers, but also tight ends. Jaheim Bell is very, very good. And this will be Keon Coleman breaking a tackle and then making somebody miss and taking it 40, 50 yards for a touchdown. Or Johnny Wilson going up and catching a ball that he couldn't have caught if he wasn't 6'7" in the red zone or something like that. That is going to be how Florida State wins this game, if they are going to win. The second differentiating factor is going to be the level of quarterback play, which I believe is a decided advantage for Louisville. I think Jack Plummer, the quarterback for Louisville, is much better and has shown me more this season than Tate Rodemaker from Florida State. Now, Rodemaker hasn't particularly had the same amount of opportunities as Jake Plummer, but in the opportunities, the play calling and his play specifically has led me to believe that he is not most likely capable of winning a football game and is probably certainly capable of losing one with his play, especially if Louisville is able to get pressure on him. We haven't particularly seen him play with pressure this year, and Louisville has an extraordinarily underrated group of edge rushers. They have had very, very good edge rushing talent for the past 3 or 4 years, and that has continued this year. So I believe Louisville will be able to get pressure on Tate Rodemaker. And it is because of that fact that I think Louisville is going to win this game. I'm not very confident in that selection, but I am going to say Louisville wins this game by the score of 24-21. I just think when it comes down to it, Louisville's defense is going to be able to either force a 3-and-out or a turnover, or to make Rodemaker make a bad play and a bad decision that's going to get him in trouble, and then Louisville's going to get the ball in plus territory or with very, very good position and be able to get a field goal when they probably shouldn't be. And I think that is going to be the edge in this game. Next game up is Tulane versus SMU. Tulane is a 5.5 point favorite, and the over-under is 48, meaning that Vegas thinks this is going to be a low-scoring game, and I agree with that, although I think the over-under is still too high. Both of these offenses have been fairly inconsistent. Now, SMU has scored a lot of points at times this year. However, they have also scored not a lot of points at times this year. And Tulane has just been remarkably inconsistent throughout this season. 1 week, they're playing a top 10 ranked Ole Miss team to a one-score game without their starting quarterback. And then the next week, they're barely beating Tulsa or East Carolina or Rice or somebody. And Rice has played a lot of fairly good group of 5 teams close this year, but they're not anything special, okay? I think they're a solid team, but they're not great. And when you look at the head-to-head of these two teams, SMU comes out on top. I think SMU also has a better loss to a better team than Ole Miss and Oklahoma, and a worse loss to TCU. TCU's kind of bad, but they can score points, and that's kind of where SMU got beat in that game. I think Vegas has it wrong, though. I don't think Tulane should be favored. I think Tulane is getting the benefit of the doubt because for the past 2 or 3 years, they've kind of been the best group of 5 team, but I think SMU is a better football team this year. And because of that, I am going to predict SMU to win by the score of 24-20. When it comes down to it, I think SMU is going to be more motivated to win this game than Tulane. Tulane's kind of been here. They've kind of already done this. I think that SMU is hungry. They've got a new coach. Their old coach left for TCU's job, and now he's trying to establish the program as his, and the best way to do that is by winning the American Championship. Michigan versus Iowa is the next game, and I don't particularly have a whole lot to talk about here. I think this is easily the safest bet for a team to win a game this week, and that's Michigan. I think Michigan is going to win this game fairly easily. I don't believe Iowa will be able to move the ball at all. And there's a very real possibility that they get shut out this game. Michigan is just too much, and too bad of a matchup for Iowa, I think, to win this game. Now, maybe if Cooper DeJean was healthy, I could say, okay, well, maybe they get a turnover in the red zone area and then they can score a touchdown, and Cooper DeJean gets a punt return for a touchdown or a kick return for a touchdown or something like that, and then you're kind of in the game all of a sudden. But he isn't healthy, and I don't think Iowa is going to be able to do that. I think Michigan is going to treat this game a lot like Penn State, where they're basically going to say the only way Iowa wins this game is if we give it to them, so we're not going to give it to them. So flat out and straight up, I have Michigan winning the game 24-3. I don't think Iowa is going to be able to move the ball. I think they're likely to turn it over 1 or 2 times, and I think Michigan is going to basically cruise control their way to either the 1 or 2 seed. The Big 12 championship is the next game up. Texas is favored by 14.5, and the over-under is 55.5. I think the over-under is tremendously low. I would be surprised if this went under, because I think Oklahoma State is, to an extent, playing this game with their pride on the line, because this is a game that nobody thinks Oklahoma State is going to win. I mean, Texas is a 2-touchdown favorite in this game, okay? Nobody particularly thinks Oklahoma State is going to win this game. And I don't think Oklahoma State is going to win this game. Spoiler alert, I guess. But Texas is also seemingly hitting their stride right now. They absolutely obliterated a honestly better than their record would indicate Texas Tech team, and Steve Sarkisian has shown that during his time at Texas, at least, has shown that his teams do show up in the big moments. Like, they've never really played a bad game when they've had a big game, so to speak. So it's because of the sort of narrative, quote unquote, reasons that I'm going to be predicting this game like it is. Because X's and O's wise, Texas should dominate. But I have Texas winning this game 38-24. So Oklahoma State does cover. Texas does not win by more than 2 touchdowns. And Oklahoma State, I think, surprises some people with their ability to move the ball. But Texas ultimately is too explosive and too consistent along the offensive side of the ball for Oklahoma State to be able to win this game. And this next game, Liberty versus New Mexico State for the Conference USA Championship, is important in the sense that I believe Tulane is going to lose. So if Liberty wins, then Liberty becomes the highest ranked Group of 5 champion, meaning that they get the automatic New Year's 6 bowl game bid. So there could, hypothetically, be quite a bit on the line in this game. New Mexico State has been a solid football team this year. However, Liberty, I think, top to bottom, is probably the most talented Group of 5 team this year. I really like Jamie Chadwell and what he did at Coastal Carolina, and I also really like what he's doing here at Liberty. And honestly, if he wins this game, he may be my pick for Coach of the Year. Probably sometime next week I'll do an awards sort of video, and Jamie Chadwell is absolutely going to be in the conversation for Coach of the Year. Now, I still think he's probably a year or two away from getting an opportunity at the Power 5 level, but I do think he is a very, very high-quality football coach. And if Liberty can, utilizing the transfer portal or just by being able to keep talent around, have this sort of season next year, he might be the front runner for like any Power 5 job he wants. Now, when it comes to this game, Liberty has been a tremendously high-powered and efficient offense this year, and New Mexico State's kind of been more of an all-around sort of team. The spread is 10.5, and I think that's just about spot on, and the over-under is 54.5, and I think that's maybe a little bit low. My prediction for this game is Liberty 35, New Mexico State 24. I think these are two quality group of 5 teams, but I believe Liberty is an actual top 20 team in the country. New Mexico State, I think, is just a really good group of 5 team. Now, I believe that this next game, Toledo versus Miami of Ohio, is not only an elite matchup of logos, but also an elite MAC matchup. I think these are two extraordinarily equal teams. Toledo has been remarkably inconsistent this year. Now, they've been very effective running the football and a little bit inconsistent passing the ball. That's where the majority of their inconsistency has come from, in my opinion. And Miami has been the model of a consistency in MACtion this year. Now, a lot of people might not know this, but this is a rematch of a game that happened in the middle of October where Toledo won 21-17. So there is a revenge factor in play here for Miami. So they could very well be more motivated to play this game than Toledo. However, I don't necessarily believe that, because Toledo does have an outside shot at getting that New Year's Six bowl game bid. I think it would take both Liberty and Tulane losing and then Toledo winning in order for that to happen. But it's a possibility. It might not be a great possibility, but it is something that could happen. I think Jason Candle has done a fantastic job at Toledo basically since he took over the job. And I think Chuck Martin, shout out to Grand Valley State over there in western side of Michigan there, but Chuck Martin has done a great job at Miami, I think. And I think he's finally gotten himself a team now that actually has some serious talent at the group of 5 level, and that can basically play with anybody at the group of 5 level. All that being said, I literally don't know who to pick in this game. I'm going to go Toledo 21, Miami of Ohio 20, but I am not confident in Toledo being able to win this game. I think it would be fun for either one of these teams to win the game, because I like seeing group of 5 teams get to like 11, maybe even 12 wins. But I think Toledo ultimately just finds a way to get it done. I think they are the more talented team. I do think they have a slight edge at head coach, and I do just overall think they are in a better position to win this MAC championship. The next game on the docket here is Boise State versus UNLV, or the University of Northern Las Vegas. And this is also an extraordinarily interesting matchup to me. Now, most people are not going to find the Mountain West an interesting matchup at all, but I do think that these are two high-quality football teams at the group of 5 level, and I believe this game is going to be wildly entertaining. I think these are two very evenly matched teams. However, I do think that Boise State does have a little bit more of an edge when it comes to the run game versus UNLV's run defense, and that ultimately may be the difference in this game. But both of these teams can put up points, and like legitimately put up points. They're both averaging north of 9 yards per pass and have very explosive passing games. The spread is Boise State minus 2.5, and the over-under is 54.5. I don't really have a whole lot to go against when it comes to spread. I do think Boise State, since they fired their head coach, has probably been the better team than UNLV, but I think the over-under is decidedly low. These are two high-powered offenses. I would not be surprised at all if this game ended up in the upper 30s for both teams. And because of that, I am going to predict this game to be high scoring. I'm going to go Boise State 30 and UNLV 31. I don't really know who's going to win this game, much like the MAC championship. I think these are two very even teams, and perhaps there is a little bit of an advantage to Boise State in terms of the actual matchup of the game, but I'm going to predict UNLV to win because Michigan beat UNLV, and I want to be able to say that Michigan beat a conference champion. The next one is the big one, Washington versus Oregon. The spread is Oregon -9. The over-under is 66.5. I think those are both just about right on the money. Washington came out and played against Oregon the first time in an extremely motivated manner. That game felt like they were playing in the Super Bowl. And it also kind of felt like Oregon didn't bring that same level of intensity to that game. And there were also some weird things going on with coaching decisions and going for it on fourth down in that game that kind of made me think that Washington got lucky in order to beat Oregon. And I do think that the revenge factor is going to be fairly important in this game. I think Oregon is going to show up motivated. I think they're going to show up ready to play. And I think they're also going to show up ready to dominate. I think Oregon has become a much better team since they matched up the first time. And I think a lot of Washington's weaknesses have also become more exposed since this game was played the first time. And it's because of all of those factors that I believe Oregon is going to win this game. And I don't particularly think it's going to be all that close. I think it's going to be Oregon 37, Washington 27. I think Oregon pretty much from the snap is going to have control over this game and have control over their own playoff destiny, in my opinion. Now, when it comes to the SEC, I made a whole ass video breaking down this matchup in much more in depth than I'm going to do right now. So if you would like to hear a more detailed version of Alabama versus Georgia, you can go ahead and watch that video. But the spread for this game is 5.5. I actually think it's gone down since the opening spread. But the opening spread for this game was Georgia -5.5, and the over-under was 56.5. I predicted at the end of that game that Alabama would lose by 7, and the score would be Georgia 31, Alabama 24. I just think when it comes down to it that Georgia is more talented and has a much better matchup than Alabama does. I think Georgia finally got the monkey off the back, so to speak, when they beat Alabama in that national championship game. And I think Kirby Smart right now is absolutely fantastic. So I'm sticking with Georgia over Alabama. The final championship game that we're going to be talking about is the Sun Belt Championship, which is Troy versus Appalachia State. And App State should not be in this game. It should be Troy versus James Madison, but the NCAA has a moronic rule where teams that are moving up from the FCS level to the BCS level must wait for 2 years in order to be eligible for the postseason, except not really, because both James Madison and Jacksonville State are going to be able to be in bowl games, but not conference championship games, which they both would have been eligible to play in. Nevertheless, Troy is favored by 6.5, and the over-under is 51.5. My prediction is going to be Troy 27, App State 20, mainly because I don't think App State should be in this game, so I'm going to have them lose. But actually, I just think Troy is a better team. I think they play better defense, and I think they're better coached right now. Now, Appalachia State's coach is, I think, in his second or third year, so he hasn't particularly had a whole lot of time to get his feet on the ground, but I do think they are headed in the correct direction, but Troy is going to win this game. Now, if everything goes as I have predicted it, then the playoff picture is going to look like this. It is going to be Georgia at number 1, Michigan at 2, Oregon at number 3, and Texas at number 4. I don't particularly think that Texas is going to jump to number 3, considering that Oregon is currently ranked number 5 and Texas is behind them. So I think Oregon likely stays at number 3 and Texas would then move to number 4. This would not be a nightmare scenario and is probably the cleanest possible situation for the College Football Playoff Committee. I don't particularly think anybody could be disappointed with these matchups, and I don't particularly think anybody could complain about the 4 teams and the order in which they are ranked. But what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. It's at this point I'd like to say, like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagreed with me at any point or you just have something to say, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comment section. So with the outro out of the way, there's only one thing left to say. I'll see you next time.